My sister used her government job to create fake violations on my inherited property to steal it from me. I spent 11 years saving lives as a dispatcher while my family said I was just a voice on a phone. Here's what happened when I finally fought back. Original post. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because at 2:47 a.m., between calls about a cardiac arrest on Willow Street and a suspected stroke at the nursing home on Harbor Road, I realized that I have no one left to talk to. My name is Marcus, I'm 32, and I've been an emergency dispatcher for the city of Riverside for 11 years. In that time, I've talked a suicidal teenager down from a bridge, guided a panicking father through infant CPR until the ambulance arrived, and coordinated response to a 5-car pileup that would have killed 3 more people if I hadn't rerouted units from adjacent districts. But to my family, I'm just a voice on a phone. My sister Danielle is 34 and works as a permit compliance officer for the city's building and safety department. She went to college, got a degree in public administration, and has spent the last decade climbing the municipal ladder. Our parents, Dad is 61, Mom is 59, have never let me forget the difference between us. Danielle has a real career, my mother said at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, right in front of everyone. She makes decisions that matter. She has an office with her name on the door. You just answer calls. I wanted to tell her about the woman I'd stayed on the line with for 47 minutes while she hid in her closet from an intruder, whispering so quietly I had to strain to hear her, trusting me completely to keep her alive. About the calm I had to maintain while a man told me he was watching his wife bleed out from a car accident, her hand growing cold in his while I coordinated helicopter transport. About the hundreds of tiny moments where the right instruction, the right tone, the right words made the difference between life and death. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded and passed the mashed potatoes. This is the dynamic I've lived with my entire life. Danielle was the golden child who could do no wrong. She got straight A's, so my B's were disappointing. She played soccer and won trophies, so my quiet love of reading was antisocial. She went to college and got a degree, so my decision to enter the workforce directly after high school was settling. I was the afterthought who somehow managed to disappoint even when I hadn't done anything wrong. Then Grandma Rose died. Grandma Rose was the one person in my family who saw me. Really saw me. She came to my graduation from dispatcher training when no one else bothered. She asked me about my work and actually listened, leaning forward with genuine interest while I described the protocols, the technology, the split-second decisions. When I told her about the difficult calls, the ones that stayed with me, the ones that woke me up at night, she'd squeeze my hand and tell me I was doing God's work. She left her duplex to me. I found out at the reading of the will. Danielle's face went from polite interest to barely concealed rage in the span of 3 seconds. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers curled around the armrest of her chair. The duplex is in a gentrifying neighborhood called Riverside Heights that's exploded in value over the past 5 years. Conservative estimates put it at $1.2 million, though some similar properties have sold for closer to $1.5 million. There must be some mistake, Danielle said to the attorney, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus doesn't even have a real job. He couldn't possibly maintain a property like that. The attorney, a tired-looking woman named Patricia who had clearly seen this kind of family drama before, just shook her head. Mrs. Chen was very specific in her instructions. The duplex goes to Marcus, along with a letter she asked me to give him privately. The letter made me cry in my car for 20 minutes. Grandma Rose wrote about how proud she was of me, how she knew the work I did was thankless but essential, how she wished she had told me more often how much I mattered. She wrote that she wanted me to have something that was mine, something stable, something no one could take away from me. You have always been the heart of this family, even when they couldn't see it, she wrote. This house is my way of making sure you always have a home. That was 4 months ago. Yesterday, I received a certified letter from the city's building and safety department informing me that my property had 17 outstanding code violations, including structural damage to the foundation, illegal electrical work, a condemned gas line, inadequate fire egress, unpermitted bathroom renovations, and 11 other items that would cost approximately $180,000 to address. The letter gave me 30 days to address the violations or face daily fines of $500 per violation. That's $8,500 per day if I couldn't fix everything in time. 17 violations. On a property that passed inspection when Grandma Rose refinanced it 3 years ago. A property that had been maintained meticulously by my grandmother, who never let so much as a loose floorboard go unrepaired. I know what's happening. I just can't prove it yet. My parents called this morning. Not to check on me, not to ask how I was handling the stress, but to let me know that Danielle had generously offered to buy the duplex from me for $400,000, less than a third of its value, to help me out of this mess. Dad said it like he was announcing she'd won the Nobel Prize. She's looking out for you, son. She knows you don't have the money to fix all those problems. This is her way of taking care of family. You should be grateful she's willing to take this burden off your hands." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said I'd think about it and hung up. I'm sitting in the dispatch center right now, on my 15-minute break, typing this on my phone. In 10 minutes, I'll go back to my station and spend the next 8 hours being the calm voice that helps people through the worst moments of their lives. I'll guide someone through stopping severe bleeding, or talk a panicked mother through checking if her child is breathing, or coordinate multiple units responding to a house fire. Meanwhile, my own family is coordinating to steal what my grandmother wanted me to have. I don't know what to do. I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford the inspection fees they're demanding. All I know is that I refuse to let them win. If anyone has advice, I'm listening. Update 1, 3 weeks later. Thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. I received over 400 messages, and while I couldn't reply to everyone individually, I read every single comment. Several of you suggested things that I've now done, and I need to share what I found because it's worse than I ever imagined. First, as many of you recommended, I contacted the county's office of the Inspector General. I explained my situation, my sister's position in the Building and Safety Department, the sudden appearance of 17 violations on a property that had recently passed inspection, the suspiciously timed offer to buy the property at a fraction of its value. The investigator I spoke with, a woman named Chen, no relation to my grandmother, was immediately interested. She asked me to document everything and said they'd already received other complaints about that department. Second, I used some of the emergency fund I'd been saving for years, money that was supposed to be for actual emergencies like car repairs or medical bills, but I guess this qualifies, to hire a private investigator. His name is Raymond Okonkwo, and he's a retired forensic accountant who spent 20 years at the IRS before transitioning to private investigation specializing in municipal corruption cases. He wasn't cheap, $5,000 retainer plus expenses, but after hearing my story, he agreed to take the case on a sliding scale based on outcome. What Raymond found made me physically sick. My 17 violations weren't isolated. They weren't even unusual for my sister's department. Raymond cross-referenced every complaint and violation issued by my sister's unit over the past 3 years, pulling data from public records requests and a contact he still had at the county assessor's office. He found a pattern that was impossible to ignore. 65 properties in total showed suspicious violation reports, all tied to estate transfers, divorces, bankruptcy proceedings, or other situations where distressed sales could be leveraged. The violations always appeared within weeks of the triggering event, a death, a divorce filing, a bankruptcy petition, and they always targeted properties in desirable neighborhoods where values had been climbing. 65 families. 65 properties. Hundreds of fabricated violations designed to force desperate people into selling for pennies on the dollar. My sister, it turns out, has been running what amounts to a sophisticated shakedown operation using her government position. She identifies properties in transition, scanning obituaries, divorce filings, bankruptcy records, and then slaps them with enough violations to make repairs financially impossible. Then, through a network of associates including a property management company called Riverside Holdings LLC run by her husband's cousin Derek, she swoops in with lowball offers. She's been doing this for at least 3 years, possibly longer. The property management company has acquired 14 properties this way. Total market value based on comparable sales, approximately $18 million. They paid less than $6 million combined. The profits are funneled through a series of LLCs that eventually lead back to accounts controlled by my sister and her husband. Raymond also found email correspondence between Danielle and 2 other inspectors in her department, obtained through a source he wouldn't name. They've been coordinating violation reports, timing them to maximize pressure on property owners, and splitting referral fees from the property management company. One email, sent the day after Grandma Rose's will was read, said simply, "New property incoming. Make sure this one sticks. Family situation complicated, but my parents are handling the pressure campaign." My parents are handling it. I read that email 6 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. My own mother and father, coordinating with my sister to steal my inheritance. The same parents who couldn't be bothered to come to my dispatcher certification ceremony. The same parents who once told me, in front of extended family at Christmas dinner, that I should have gone into real estate like a normal person instead of playing telephone operator. I met with an attorney this week. Her name is Sandra Reyes, and she specializes in civil rights and government corruption cases. She's represented whistleblowers, wrongful termination victims, and citizens whose rights were violated by local governments. When I showed her Raymond's findings, the spreadsheets, the property records, the emails, she got very quiet. Then she said something that gave me hope for the first time in weeks. "Marcus, This isn't just a civil matter anymore. What your sister is doing, what this entire network is doing, that's federal. They're using government authority to deprive citizens of their property rights under color of law. They're committing wire fraud by using electronic communications to further their scheme. There's a reason the FBI has a public corruption unit, and this is exactly the kind of case they love. Sandra has connections from her previous work on public corruption cases. She made some calls. Within a week, I learned that there are now 3 separate investigations happening simultaneously. First, the city's inspector general is conducting an internal investigation into the building and safety department, specifically my sister's unit and the 2 inspectors who collaborated with her. Second, the state's Housing Oversight Commission has opened an inquiry based on fair housing concerns, because many of the targeted properties were in minority-majority neighborhoods, and several victims were elderly people of color. Third, and this is the one that made my hands shake when Sandra told me, she filed a formal complaint with the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force. They've already interviewed Raymond and reviewed his documentation. An agent named Morrison called me last week to confirm my contact information and tell me that I would be contacted soon for a formal interview. Meanwhile, my violations remain on the books. My 30 days passed, and the city has started issuing fines. I'm now $47,500 in the hole and counting, with no way to pay and no legal authority willing to put a hold on the fines until the investigations conclude. I'm bleeding money I don't have, watching my savings evaporate while my sister continues to work in her office with her name on the door. But here's what keeps me going. Last week, I took the overnight shift, the brutal 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. rotation that most dispatchers dread. At 3:15 a.m., I received a call from a 12-year-old boy named James. His mother had collapsed in the kitchen and wasn't breathing. His father was deployed overseas. His older sister had gone to a friend's house. He was alone. I walked that terrified child through basic CPR for 9 minutes and 43 seconds. I kept my voice calm and steady while he cried. I counted out compressions with him, told him he was doing great, promised him the ambulance was coming. I heard his mother gasp and cough and start breathing again through the phone. 9 minutes. A scared kid following my instructions, trusting my voice, believing me when I said everything would be okay. That's what I do. That's my real career. And when this is over, everyone is going to know it. Update 2. 6 weeks later. The FBI moved faster than anyone expected. Sandra called me last Tuesday morning, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Take the day off work, she said. You're going to want to see this in person. Be at the federal courthouse at 9 a.m. Wear something professional. I watched my sister get arrested. She was wearing a navy blue suit, the same one she wore to Grandma Rose's funeral, the one she picked out specifically because she said it made her look authoritative and professional. 2 federal agents in dark suits walked into her office at 9:15 a.m. I wasn't there for that part, but Raymond was conducting surveillance and sent me photos. Her face in those pictures is frozen in disbelief, like she genuinely couldn't comprehend that consequences applied to her. By 9:30, she was being processed at the Federal Detention Center. By noon, she was standing in front of a federal magistrate for her initial appearance. I was in the gallery, in the back row, watching as she was informed of the charges against her. The charges are extensive. The U.S. Attorney's Office held a press conference that afternoon on the courthouse steps. They charged Danielle with 14 counts of wire fraud, each carrying up to 20 years, 8 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, each carrying up to 10 years, 6 counts of conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, and 4 counts of money laundering. The 2 inspectors who worked with her are facing similar charges. The property management company run by Derek, her husband's cousin, has been seized pending investigation, and her husband Thomas is being investigated for his role in structuring the financial transactions. Total estimated damages to victims, $23 million across all 65 properties. That number kept echoing in my head during the press conference. $23 million stolen from people using the very office that's supposed to protect homeowners from predatory practices. People lost their homes, their inheritances, their financial security, their retirement plans. Some of them were elderly and had to move into assisted living they couldn't afford. Some were single parents who ended up homeless. One couple, according to Raymond's research, lost their home 3 months after the wife was diagnosed with cancer. She died in a rental apartment instead of the house where she'd raised her children. All because my sister decided she deserved what they had. I've been contacted by several of the other victims now. We've formed an informal support group, sharing information through a Signal chat and meeting once a week at a coffee shop in Riverside Heights. One woman, Maria Gonzalez, lost her mother's home the same way I almost lost Grandma Rose's duplex. Her mother had early-stage dementia and couldn't navigate the violation notices or understand why she was suddenly facing thousands in fines. Maria had been living in another state and didn't know what was happening until it was too late. The property management company bought her mother's house, a 4-bedroom Victorian that had been in their family for 60 years, for $290,000. It was worth $1.1 million. I thought I was going crazy, Maria told me over coffee, her hands wrapped around her mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Everyone at the city kept telling me the violations were legitimate, that my mother's house was falling apart. I had 3 independent inspectors look at it. They all said it was in excellent condition. But no one would listen to me. They treated me like I was a hysterical daughter who couldn't accept that her mother's house was a safety hazard. Now people are listening. My parents' reaction has been exactly what I expected, which somehow makes it worse. They haven't called me since the arrest. Not one word. No acknowledgement that I was right. No apology for pressuring me to sell. No admission that they knew what Danielle was doing. But according to my cousin Janet, who I've always been close with and who has served as my informal spy in family gatherings, they're telling everyone who will listen that I orchestrated this entire witch hunt to destroy Danielle, and that Marcus was always jealous of her success and finally found a way to tear her down. Janet sent me screenshots of their Facebook posts. My mother wrote, "Our family is being persecuted because Marcus couldn't handle his sister having a better life than him. The federal government is wasting taxpayer money investigating a dedicated public servant because her jealous brother couldn't accept being the less successful child. Please pray for Danielle during this difficult time." 243 people liked that post. 47 left comments expressing sympathy for my parents and disgust at my betrayal. I don't know how to feel about that. Angry, sad, vindicated. Mostly I just feel tired. Tired of being the villain in a story where I was always the victim. Tired of hoping that someday my parents would see me the way Grandma Rose did. The city has dropped all violations against my property. They had no choice once the federal investigation made their internal corruption public. The city attorney sent me a formal letter acknowledging that the violations were issued in error and that all associated fines would be vacated. Sandra says we have grounds for a substantial civil suit against the city for damages, emotional distress, and violations of my civil rights under Section 1983. She's also named in the suit the 2 other inspectors, the property management company, and my sister personally. Raymond, my investigator, has become something of a local hero. 3 news outlets have interviewed him about the case, and he's been contacted by families in other cities who suspect similar schemes. He keeps deflecting credit to a brave young man who refused to accept injustice, which I assume means me, though I don't feel particularly brave. I just refused to lose my grandmother's house. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next month. Sandra says the evidence is overwhelming. Federal prosecutors have a 93% conviction rate and they rarely bring charges this extensive unless they're certain they can prove every count. Danielle's attorney, an expensive criminal defense lawyer her husband hired using funds that are probably also going to be seized, is already making noises about a plea deal. Part of me hopes she takes it. The evidence is public now, the victims have been acknowledged, the scheme has been exposed. Maybe a plea would let everyone heal faster. Part of me wants to see a full trial. I want to sit in that courtroom every single day and watch as prosecutors methodically present every email, every fraudulent violation, every destroyed life. I want to see my sister's face when victim after victim takes the stand to describe what she did to them. Mostly, I just want it to be over so I can move forward. Update 3. Final update, 4 months after original post. This will be my final update. Not because the story is over, there are still appeals and civil proceedings ahead, loose ends that will take years to fully resolve, but because the main chapter has closed and I need to move forward with my life. Danielle was sentenced last week. She rejected the plea deal. Her attorney convinced her that a jury trial would somehow vindicate her, that 12 ordinary citizens would see her as a dedicated public servant who made innocent procedural mistakes rather than a calculating predator who systematically destroyed vulnerable families. Perhaps she believed her own narrative. Perhaps she thought her professional appearance and educated manner would outweigh 2,400 pages of damning evidence. She was wrong. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It was covered by local news, picked up by several national outlets covering public corruption, and live-tweeted by a journalist from the state's largest newspaper. Every day, I sat in the gallery and watched as the case against my sister built inexorably toward conviction. The prosecution presented 2,400 pages of documents, emails, financial records, and property transfer records. They brought in 16 witnesses, 3 former colleagues who had become cooperating witnesses and testified about being pressured to participate in the scheme, Maria and 5 other victims who described in heartbreaking detail how they lost their homes, a forensic accountant who traced the money through multiple shell companies back to my sister's personal accounts, an expert on municipal corruption who called my sister's scheme one of the most systematic, callous, and effectively organized. Abuses of public trust I've seen in 30 years of studying these cases, and me. I testified for 4 hours. I described Grandma Rose's death, the reading of the will, my sister's immediate reaction, the 17 violations that appeared on a recently inspected property, my parents' pressure campaign, and the months of stress and fear and financial devastation I experienced while my family tried to steal my inheritance. Sandra prepared me well, but nothing could fully prepare me for looking at my sister across the courtroom while I explained what she did to me. She didn't meet my eyes once during my testimony. Danielle took the stand in her own defense. Her attorney tried to frame her as a conscientious public servant who simply applied existing code enforcement standards consistently. It might have worked if the prosecution hadn't spent 3 weeks demolishing that narrative with evidence. Under cross-examination, my sister fell apart. She admitted, after being confronted with her own emails, that she knew the violations on my property were fabricated. She admitted that she had discussed handling the Marcus situation with our parents before filing the violations. She admitted, when pressed by the prosecutor, that she viewed my inheritance as unfair and felt entitled to correct the imbalance in our family. Grandma Rose didn't understand Marcus's limitations, she said at one point, apparently forgetting she was trying to convince a jury of her innocence. She made an emotional decision instead of a practical one. Someone needed to fix that mistake. The prosecutor let that statement hang in the air for a long moment before moving on. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found her guilty on all 32 counts. At the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed victim impact statements. 7 of us spoke, including Maria, who described her mother's confusion and fear during the last months of her life as she was forced out of her home. I spoke last. I told the court about Grandma Rose, about the letter she left me, about how she was the only person in my family who believed I was doing something meaningful with my life, about how my sister tried to take the one thing my grandmother gave me specifically because she knew how much it meant. Then I told them about my job, about the calls I take, the lives I help save, the families I guide through their worst moments, about James, the 12-year-old who performed CPR on his mother while I counted compressions through the phone. My sister spent years telling everyone I was worthless because I just answer phones, I said. She used that contempt to justify stealing from me. But the truth is, I've spent my career being the calm voice that helps people survive. She spent hers being the predator that destroyed them. The judge sentenced Danielle to 14 years in federal prison. Not concurrent, consecutive sentences on the most serious charges. She also ordered complete forfeiture of all proceeds from the scheme, permanent loss of her public employee pension, 15 years of contributions, gone, and $4.8 million in restitution to her victims. She will be 71 years old when she's eligible for release. She will be a convicted felon for the rest of her life. She will never work in government again. My civil suit against the city settled 3 weeks ago for $4.5 million. I need to write that number again because I still don't quite believe it. $4.5 million. Sandra explained that the city wanted desperately to avoid a civil trial that would expose additional corruption in their inspection departments. The FBI investigation had uncovered evidence suggesting my sister's scheme was just the most organized version of practices that were more widespread than anyone realized. A public trial would have forced the city to confront failures at every level of oversight. The settlement includes the money, a formal written apology from the city council, a commitment to reform their violation and inspection procedures with independent oversight, the creation of a citizen review board with real authority to investigate complaints, and an agreement to review all cases handled by my sister's department over the past 5 years and provide remediation to anyone who was wrongly targeted. 31 families have already filed for review under that provision. Raymond is helping them pro bono. I've been promoted to dispatch supervisor. This happened 2 weeks ago, during what I thought was a routine meeting about scheduling software. Instead, my director, a woman named Patricia Chen, again, no relation to my grandmother, though I've started to wonder if the universe is sending me messages, sat me down and told me that the department had been quietly evaluating candidates for supervisor for 6 months. You have the highest accuracy rate in the department, she said. The best caller outcome metrics. The respect of every dispatcher who's ever worked a shift with you. We should have promoted you years ago, Marcus. We're correcting that now. I supervise a team of 12 dispatchers. I train new hires. I review protocols and work with the Emergency Services Coordination Office to improve response times. I'm developing a new training module on caller de-escalation techniques based on my years of experience. It's more responsibility than I've ever had, and for the first time in my life, I feel like my work is being recognized by people other than Grandma Rose. My parents have not contacted me since the sentencing. I don't expect them to. According to Janet, they've started telling people that Danielle was set up and that the trial was rigged against her. My mother has started a GoFundMe for Danielle's appeal fund. It's raised $3,400, mostly from relatives who only know my parents' version of events. I haven't responded to any of it. I've blocked their numbers and their social media accounts. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. But yesterday, I received a letter from Danielle. It was postmarked from the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, where she's serving her sentence. The return address listed her inmate number. I almost didn't open it. For nearly an hour, I sat at my kitchen table in Grandma Rose's duplex, holding that envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Part of me expected manipulation, another attempt to minimize what she'd done, to shift blame, to convince me to support her appeal. Part of me expected rage, accusations that I destroyed her life, demands that I fix what I'd broken. What I found was neither. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten on lined prison stationery. Her handwriting, usually so precise, was cramped and uneven in places, like she'd struggled to get the words out. She wrote about her first weeks in prison, about the mandatory psychological counseling sessions she's required to attend, about the therapist, a woman named Dr. Okafor, who had asked her to trace her behaviors back to their origins, to understand not just what she did but why she did it. I've been thinking about Thanksgiving, she wrote, when Mom said you were just a voice on a phone. I remember feeling satisfied when she said that. Vindicated. Like the world was finally acknowledging what I'd always believed, that I was worth more than you. I spent my whole life believing that. Mom and Dad made me believe it. Every time they praised my grades, they mentioned your average ones. Every time they celebrated my achievements, they pointed out your lack of them. They taught me that my worth was measured by being better than you. I never questioned it. I just absorbed it and let it shape who I became. Dr. Okafor calls it competitive identity formation. She says some parents, often unconsciously, create rivalry between children as a way of motivating them. But what it really does is teach one child that they only have value when they're diminishing someone else. I didn't see what I was becoming. I was so focused on being better than you that I became worse than I ever imagined possible. I destroyed my own life trying to take yours. She wrote about the resentment she felt when Grandma Rose left me the duplex. How she convinced herself that it was an injustice, that Grandma Rose had been manipulated, that I had somehow tricked a dying old woman into changing her will. How she spent weeks planning the violation scheme, feeling righteous the entire time, genuinely believing she was correcting a wrong rather than committing a crime. I told myself you didn't deserve that house. That you hadn't earned it. That Grandma Rose made a mistake and someone needed to fix it. I told myself that so many times that I believed it. I never stopped to ask myself, why did Grandma Rose choose Marcus? What did she see in him that she didn't see in me? Now I know. She saw someone who didn't need to tear others down to feel valuable. She saw someone who spent his life helping people instead of exploiting them. She saw the person I could never let myself become, because becoming that person would have meant admitting I wasn't better than you. She apologized. Not in the careful, attorney-approved language of a legal document designed to minimize liability, but in raw, ugly, honest words that clearly cost her something to write. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry for the violations. I'm sorry for trying to steal your home. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel small, every time I let Mom and Dad's favoritism make me cruel instead of kind. I'm sorry for becoming someone who hurts people for money and calls it justified. I understand if you never forgive me. I don't forgive myself. I may never forgive myself. But I needed you to know that I finally understand what I did and why I did it. I also need you to know, what Grandma Rose saw in you was real. You were always the better person. I just couldn't let myself see it. She asked me to take care of Grandma Rose's duplex. That house meant something to her, and she chose to give it to you for a reason. I see that now. Maybe I always saw it, and that's why I couldn't stand it. You were always the one she truly loved, because you were the one who never needed to prove anything. You just were who you were, and that was enough. I cried reading that letter. Not for Danielle, she did this to herself, and she's facing the consequences she earned. I cried for the relationship we might have had if our parents hadn't poisoned it from the very beginning. For the sister I could have grown up with, instead of the competitor I was forced to defend against. For the children we both were, shaped by parents who taught us to measure our worth against each other instead of finding it within ourselves. I'm not sure if I'll write back. Not yet. The wounds are too fresh, the damage too extensive. Maybe someday. Maybe never. But I've kept the letter, folded in the drawer of my nightstand, where I can look at it when I'm ready. I'm keeping Grandma Rose's duplex. I've renovated both units using some of the settlement money. The downstairs tenant, a retired nurse named Helen who has lived there for 12 years, will continue living there for as long as she wants at the same rent Grandma Rose charged her. The upstairs unit, I've turned into a comfortable home for myself. New kitchen, updated bathroom, a small office where I can work on my dispatcher training materials. Every morning, I wake up in my grandmother's house. I look at the picture of her on my dresser, the one from my dispatcher graduation, where she's beaming at me like I just won the Nobel Prize, and I remember that someone in my family believed in me. The rest of the settlement is going into savings, investments, and a foundation I'm starting with Maria and some of the other victims. We're calling it the Rose Chen Housing Justice Fund. It will provide legal resources, investigative support, and emergency financial assistance for homeowners who suspect they're being targeted by municipal corruption. Raymond has agreed to serve on the board and provide his expertise. Sandra is helping us set up the non-profit structure. Because here's what I learned through all of this. My job was never just being a voice on a phone. It was being a voice when someone needed one most. It was staying calm when everything was falling apart. It was guiding people through their darkest moments and helping them find their way back to safety. That's what I did for the callers on my line. That's what Raymond did for me when I was drowning in violations and fines. That's what Sandra did for all 65 families who lost their homes to my sister's greed. Now I get to do it for others. Not just on the phone, but through the foundation. Not just in crisis moments, but in the long, slow work of rebuilding justice. Grandma Rose would be proud. Final edit. To everyone who supported me through this journey, who gave advice, shared resources, offered encouragement, or simply let me know I wasn't alone, thank you. I wasn't sure anyone would read my first desperate post at 2:47 a.m., and I definitely didn't expect it to turn into this. For anyone going through something similar, please know that there is hope, even when your own family is the enemy. Document everything. Find allies. Trust the process even when it feels impossibly slow. Justice exists. Sometimes you just have to fight like hell to find it. And for what it's worth, if you're a dispatcher, a 911 operator, an EMT, a nurse, a social worker, or anyone else whose work gets dismissed as just something, know that your work matters. Know that the lives you save, the crises you navigate, the calm you provide in chaos, all of it is real and valuable and important. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I need to go now. My shift starts in an hour, and there are calls waiting. Stay safe out there. Marcus.